Hi everyone, my name is Christopher Donald. Welcome to my channel, and this is going to be part of my Business of Art conversation series, my podcast where I'm talking about all of the bits of being a professional ceramicist that we don't like to talk about or we don't like to think about. How you can actually make a living at doing this and what's involved in being able to do certain things within our industry. Pricing is something that I'm asked about a lot, and I've been lucky enough to have worked um, both for myself and within other parts of our industry where we had to establish fair and accurate pricing models. Um, this is frankly like what any small business does. We don't like to think of art as being like selling a widget, but art is like selling a widget. Unfortunately, it's also a widget that no one needs. And unless you're making functional work, it's a widget that actually doesn't even do anything necessary. So if you're selling paintings, this gets even tougher. If you're selling mugs, I mean, at least you can drink out of your mug. I'm selling a painting. It's not like it's holding the wall up for anyone. So when it comes to establishing what we consider a value, often artists are approaching this in a much more emotional way. We think of value the way that we think of worth, like your self worth. What is the worth of this art? And it's really not a great way of kind of approaching it as far as determining the amount of money that you're going to need to earn net on making this mug. If I make this mug, how much money should I be charging for this mug so that I know I can make enough mugs at that amount of money to pay my bills, to live, and to do the things I need money to do? And often this gets clouded by whether or not people need the money. To be honest, most artists are subsidized in some way. We are either subsidizing ourselves with a day job or some other way of having an income. We are subsidized by family or loved ones who we live with, who are the ones that actually do pay for our most of our expenses, either a spouse or our parents. Um, we have roommates, and that reduces our overhead costs of living. We pay for shared studio space. We don't pay for studio space because we work somewhere where we can use the studio. At so many different levels, what we do is subsidized in some way. And when you're trying to figure out pricing, the important thing is to take all of that out of the equation. You need to imagine a world where you don't have any support, where you need to pay for everything from this. And that's where your pricing starts. So what I like to do is essentially say, okay, well, what's the lowest amount I'd be willing to work for somebody else that they would pay me to work full time. Nowadays, that's like $12 to $15 an hour. Very different, a lot higher than it was in my day. Um, so let's say $15 an hour. Now, if you're working full time, 15 dollars an hour, you're also going to get benefits, hopefully, and those benefits are worth about 30% of your salary on top of your salary. So if I'm self-employed, I need to cover not just my salary, but the benefits that I will now have to buy for myself and add on top of my salary. I get it. You're young. You're thinking to yourself, I don't really need health benefits. I'm going to be fine. Consider though that in you're going to have a small business which is the success of which is based on your physical ability to do a thing. At any point, if you get sick, if you get injured, your ability to make any money goes to zero. So protecting your health and your well-being is a business investment. It is not a luxury. And we'll talk more about that with some of the other things about like how you set up what kind of work that you're going to make. All right, so let's start off with so we basically need to say, I'm making 15 bucks an hour. That's my starting point. Great. What am I making my stuff with? So again, we're assuming you're not subsidized. You're not getting free studio access. You're not getting free firing or anything like that. What is the cost going to be to you? You need the equipment that you are required to have to do your job. If you're a wheel thrower, that's going to be a wheel. Luckily, wheels are the best time in history to ever buy a wheel. A lot of the trademarks, or not trademarks, but copyrights on some of the earlier wheels have expired, and the Chinese have swept in, as they do, and are now creating high quality, low cost potter's wheels. You can get a wheel for under 200 bucks at this point. If you want, you can spend 3,000 on another wheel, which will be a nicer wheel. But remember, you have to buy, like 20 of them, 20 of the cheaper wheels to equal one of those expensive wheels. I personally use one of the Chinese wheels for most of my work at this point because it's lightweight and I can move it around for doing demos and stuff. I think they're honestly excellent, and it's a great place to start if you need to keep your costs down. So you need a wheel. You need tables. You probably need a kiln. And I highly recommend that, since this is a small business that you're starting, you get depreciation on equipment, buy new equipment. You get 3 years of depreciation on the value of that equipment with your taxes. So you're going to want to buy a new wheel, even if it's a cheap wheel. You're going to want to buy a new kiln, even if it's a less expensive kiln. And practically, let's just assume you're going to be firing things in an electric kiln. Whether or not you have space and the money to build an outdoor atmospheric kiln, I think we're just going to have to leave that off the table at this point. You may or may not. That would be a separate expense. So consider that. So let's say $3,000 to get a small-ish professional electric kiln, computer kiln, that you will use for at least the first 3 years for bisquing and for glaze firing. Now, doing glaze firing in electric kilns does wear them out a little bit quicker. You'll only be able to depreciate this kiln for 3 years. So my suggestion would be, as a small business owner, that you, at the end of that 3 years, you purchase another electric kiln, a larger one, that you'll then be using for glaze firing, or even the same size, but you'll then have 2 kilns. Anyhow, so will you need some kind of a clay mixer, power wedger, or pug mill? Really depends on the kind of work you're doing. Really depends on your efficiency as a ceramic artist. If you're doing a ton of trimming, then I would probably recommend that you invest in a power wedger. It's going to save your body. And again, this is a business built on your ability to physically do things and to keep being able to physically do those things. So your health and your physical safety are of paramount importance. If it will save you time and energy, that tool will pay for itself very quickly. It's going to be another $5,000 to get a new power wedger. I recommend the Peter Puggers because they both mix ND air, and they're very efficient. They're very high quality. They're a good investment. If you don't do a lot of trimming, maybe you're doing hand building more, or you're wheel throwing, but you're really efficient with wheel throwing, and you're not really processing a lot of scrap, I'd say you can live without it. But that's going to be kind of your call. Who's going to hook up your kiln? You don't want this kiln inside your apartment, or you can't have this kiln inside your apartment. You don't want this kiln inside your house or your basement, or really inside your garage. You want this kiln to be somewhere separate from where you live for safety, because of the outgassing that you get from the kiln, because we have numerous examples of potters' homes being burned to the ground when their equipment fails and they lose everything, because we also don't tend to have a lot of insurance. Put this thing away from your house. So you need a concrete pad poured. You need electrical run to it. You probably need water run to it. I would recommend making the pad large enough so that you can put an atmospheric kiln in the same space later when you want to. I would say you have to have some kind of a covering over it. You have to have fire retardant, heat retardant material on that covering, that roof. So the cost of having all of that put in, if you can do it yourself, that's great. If you cannot, you're going to need to hire a contractor to do that or pay someone to do that. That should be part of your initial capital expenses for setting up this small business, the small art business. So consider that. Your working space, where are you going to be doing this? Tea fuels the world. If you're going to be using a space that's where you live, that's going to be the most efficient way and probably the least or the most cost-effective way of having a studio space rather than having to rent a separate space. Let's assume you're going to try and do that. You're going to have a space where you live that you can use for your work. Preferably, it's a space separate from your house because of dust and other things, like a garage or something along those lines, or a separate outbuilding. You're going to need to think about lighting. You're going to need to think about if you're building it specifically for doing your craft, floor drains, making sure that your wallboard material, you're basically building a bathroom. So think of a clay studio as being built like a bathroom. You need drainage, you need walls which are resistant to mildew, to moisture. You're going to need a raised workstation for your wheel if you're a wheel thrower. Do not throw sitting. It absolutely will destroy your back and you'll have a much shorter career. There is no question that throwing sitting will injure you over time and not necessarily a long time. Don't do it. You're going to need tables to work on. You're going to need, preferably, very preferably, damp boxes, somewhere to store your work that you can basically keep a tray of water in it, keep the humidity high, and you're putting your work into it so that it stays damp long enough to do finishing and decorating. It's much more efficient than just wrapping everything in plastic constantly. You're going to need wear shelves and wear boards. You're going to want to consider that if you're building all of this the first time, that you think things through. All your wear boards should fit on drying racks and in your damp box and in all your storage shelving. Everything should be modular. You're going to need glazing and decorating materials. You're going to need to buy your clay, your initial outlay of 1 year's worth of clay. And you're going to have utility bills. So if you are lucky enough to build an atmospheric kiln, it's going to be gas or propane. If you're using all electric, my small electric kiln used to cost me where I am, and at the time I was doing it, it was like $18 a firing. I hear now that same kind of size is basically $30 a firing. You'll be able to figure it out pretty quick, but you're going to be paying that. So the more you work, the more you're going to be paying for electrical for firing those pieces and firing them twice. So I would ballpark this at saying at the low end, if you're not able to do the contracting work yourself, you want to budget about $25,000 for overhead for your first year. And that $25,000 needs to be paid for. So you can spread that out. You can say that that needs to come out of your profit over your first year, your first 2 years, your first 5 years. If you've needed to get a loan for that initial capital, then you can figure out how those loan payments are going to be part of the amount of money you need to make. So we started at $15 an hour, and we added 30% of that to that for our insurance. Now to that, we're adding our monthly breakdown of our initial overhead, our initial costs, and so that will be either a monthly amount or a total for the whole year. So you're going to add that to what you need to make. All right. So now let's talk about some of the nitty gritty. So how much can you make in average in a day? I'll use my numbers because I know what all my numbers are. So when I was doing all production work, I could basically make 14 mugs an hour. That was thrown, finished, and decorated as an average. I could do 14 an hour. That's very fast, and you won't be that fast. So let's say you can do 10 mugs an hour. So you're going to figure out, well, okay, so how much of my inventory is going to be mugs? How much of my inventory is going to be bowls? It's going to be larger items. It's going to be plates. It's going to be anything along those lines. You kind of figure out what you think your breakdown is of your inventory. I'll tell you straight off that most of your money is going to be made in items that are under $50 and definitely under $100. I would say 90% of what you sell is under $100. And then things above that are going to be much more difficult to sell, especially for when you're first starting to get established. Later, 10 years out, once you're more well known and you've got market share and people who've been purchasing from you regularly, you'll be able to increase that significantly. But in the beginning, let's get realistic and say that you're probably going to be selling a bunch of $50 mugs and smaller items. So how many of those can you make? Do not count on working 7 days a week. You will burn yourself out physically, emotionally, mentally. Spiritually, you'll be a broken person. So let's just call it 5 days a week. And you want to date, you want to see your kids or whatever, 5 days a week. Make it 8-hour days as well. Make it actually a 9-hour day with a 1 hour for lunch. You want lunches, you want breaks. You must look at this as a business, this is your job. And so schedule your time as a job. And you are your most valuable resource. You're your only employee at this point. You cannot break yourself. So 5 days a week. Are you realistically going to be making work not 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? No, you're not. You've got to load these kilns. You've got to unload these kilns. You've got to glaze these pieces. I didn't consider that in my calculation of throwing, finishing, and decorating. Glazing's a separate step. You have administrative work. You are a business owner. You are going to need to drum up business. You're going to need to market yourself. You're going to need to talk to people. You're going to need to go to places. You're going to need to balance your books. You're going to need to do pricing. You're going to need to pack things. You're going to need to just do the work of running your business. That's going to take time. So for sanity's sake, let's say that you are working directly on making work 3 days a week. Okay, so how many pieces can I realistically make, finish, decorate, glaze, essentially in 3 days? I just came up with a number and I said it's going to be 40 pieces. All right, that's good. So in a week, I can do that many, or I mean, it depends on the size. You know, like I said, I have numbers for what I could do. Between me and one other wheel thrower, we could do between 250 and 350 pieces a week. All we did was throw, finish, decorate. We could do that. So yours might be higher, but I'm just going to go with 40 just as a, let's just be saying, you know, I can do 40 a day, or yeah, well, let's call it 40 a week. Let's just say 40 a week. Okay, so loss rate. Our loss rate where I worked was less than 10%, which is exceptional. That was because we were making the same kind of thing with the same materials in the same way and the same people, and we did it consistently. And so we just didn't lose much because we knew what we were doing and we just didn't screw up all that much. So count on 20%. So you're going to lose 20% of those 40 pots that you make. They're just gone. All right. Now, let's say you're doing wholesale. And let's talk about wholesale a bit. I highly recommend that you do all your pricing based on wholesaling. So wholesaling is 50% of your suggested retail price. This mug, I say this is a $50 mug, so my wholesale price is $25. I want to be able to make my nut. I want to be able to pay my bills to make my yearly salary based on the wholesale price of all my work. That way, if I wholesale everything, I'm good. I'm good. I made my money. if I do the odd art fair, if I sell some things online directly, if I Etsy, if I decide to do a once a year studio sale where I work and I get retail for those things, bonus. It's gravy. That's great. Don't count on it. Count on wholesale. Wholesale, if you're doing production artwork, wholesale is a really, really smart thing to aim for. You absolutely can do a fully retail business. There are people that do that. Here's the upsides and the downsides of wholesale versus retail versus a mixed. Most people do some kind of a mixed version. Wholesale. Wholesale is I have a product line and I have the ability to be fairly consistent in how I reproduce those items. So I show people the items that I know I can 100% replicate in a consistent manner enough that I can show them a sample or a photograph of one and say, I can make 50 of these. They will look 90% like this. They're handmade. There's some variation. They will be 90% this. I am confident enough of that that I can go to shops, I can go to stores, and I can say, I can supply you with these. Here's my pricing of my 6 items that I produce right now. How many do you want? I can offer you wholesale pricing on them, which is 50% of retail, but it's a 50% deposit up front. So I produce the work. Delivery will be on this date. So that's wholesale. Wholesale is you work ahead of time on orders that are prepaid. So your operation expenses come from that 50% prepayment. And it's a nice way to work because that way I've got money to pay for, keeping the lights on, to buy clay, to buy materials and all of that. And then, once or twice a year, I make deliveries to my wholesale clients. I might even bundle that in with doing the odd art fair while I'm driving around the country, dropping things off. So that's wholesaling. Retail is I have to pay upfront for my expenses. I don't have any money coming in until I sell each thing retail. My retail places I can sell would be consignment is one. Consignment, though, you only get 60% generally. Wholesale is not that much less, and you get paid in advance for wholesale. I don't like consignment. I won't ever do consignment, but it's up to you. So consignment doesn't pay you right away either, and you only get 60% of the value. You can sell direct. You can do Etsy. You can do your own shop, online shop. You can sell from your studio. You can do once or twice yearly studio sales. You can do art fairs. Art fairs, though, keep in mind, you have to pay in advance, some time in advance. Sometimes it's almost a year in advance for especially some of the nicer, more prestigious shows. And a lot of them are juried. So they also require you to guarantee that you'll have enough inventory to make it through the whole show. If it's a 3-day art fair, they expect you to have fully stocked shelves for 3 days. And if you sell out, they're not happy with you and you may never come back to that art fair. So that's retail. So retail, you need more money up front. It takes more time to get your money. Wholesale, it can be harder to find clients. You have to do wholesale markets or fairs. You have to do a lot of direct, like going to places, kind of direct sales work. You need to be good with people, convince people to buy your work, convince them you have a quality product. And it'll take some time to build that up. There is no fast way here that you're going to build this business from the ground up, either wholesale or retail. But those are the differences between them. So, we're talking about if I'm doing wholesale, I'm guaranteeing people a specific order. They order 100 mugs, I deliver 100 mugs. And that means I make more mugs than I need. So we took 20% off for loss, but we also need to take 10% off because I need to make 10% more than I have had ordered just to cover myself. So you're going to And honestly, if you think you're at 20% loss, um, you should probably be making 20% more pots and not just 10%. So you've got your loss, you've got your extra, and I need to be able to say, okay, so I had 40 pots, I lose 20%, I lose another 20%. That remaining number of pots is my retail number. I then divide that by 50% if I'm wholesaling. That means, let's call it, I have 14 pots left that I'm doing a week. That 14, I divide how much I want to make a week by 14. That's the price I need to make per pot on average to make all of these other numbers that I've been coming up with work. And I built a calculator. I'm going to put the link for it in the description for this video so you can mess around with it. And I've got some of the descriptions of what the parts of the calculator do for you. If you want to use it, it's a view-only document. Just make a copy of it, and then you'll be able to edit your copy. There's yellow fields that are the ones that you edit, where you put in your information, like how much do I want to make an hour? How many pots do I think I can make a week? And it'll calculate everything for you, and you'll have a number at the top of it that says this is how much you need to make per pot. And mine came out to like 23 bucks. I need to make $23 wholesale. I need to net, basically. I need to net $23 on every piece that I make. And I need to make at least 14 of them a week. It's not bad, frankly. I mean, I think in my calculator, I needed to make like 70 some thousand dollars a year. And that's how you get there. So let's talk about why you're probably hesitant about this. So a lot of people, they come up with a price based, like I said, on being subsidized and on self-worth and on emotion. And they might feel guilt or hesitancy um, going out there and saying, you should pay me $100 for this. This is worth $100 based on nothing. You basically feel you're pulling the number out of the air. Go through this exercise that I've outlined, and it will make you feel much more confident about your pricing, because you know that if I'm wholesaling this for 25 bucks, I'm actually only really marking it up $2 over my entire living expenses. I must sell this for $23 no matter what, or I don't eat. So if you feel like there's a pushback, or you yourself push back emotionally on these prices, you know they're based on something real, that you went through a process of figuring out what you need to make. And I get the impetus to want to kind of just be like, well, I don't know, I'm just starting out, or this or that, and I mean, is it really worth $50? Or you're you're embarking on being part of an industry here, and this industry needs to have standards, and this industry needs to establish that it has worth. It has your time, your education, your skill has value. And we can't undercut ourselves as an industry. We can't go out there and say that this value is a sliding scale depending on who is supporting you or if you feel confident about yourself. If I go out and I work as a carpenter, my time has a set rate value by a union, and they don't care how I feel about it. If I charge less than $180 an hour, I'm going to hear about it, because that's not what carpenter's time is worth. It's not worth $20 an hour. It's worth $180 an hour. They don't care who you are. That's what you charge, because otherwise, everyone in the industry will start going for lowest common denominator, and we will just be underbidding everybody until nobody can make any money at being a carpenter anymore. No one's going to stand for that. You should not stand for that as a ceramicist. You should not be undercutting yourself and your industry and lowballing your prices to the point where later, when you need to actually pay the bills as a potter, you can't do it because you and everybody else have been underselling our profession and telling people that it's not worth enough money for you to eat. And that's not good for anybody. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about what is our industry value? What is the value of your time? If it takes you a certain amount of time to make your work, should you not be paid $15 an hour for that time? Because you figured out that you should be. So stick to your guns, come up with pricing which is reasonable. You might think to yourself, hey, but right now, like my husband, my wife, they make most of the money. I could sell this for a little bit less. Sure. And then if you get divorced or they die or they get injured or they retire or whatever, your life circumstances change, now you have to justify, now you're charging $50 for a mug you were charging $30 for. Why the sudden $20 increase in price? Did it suddenly become more valuable? No. Was it suddenly less valuable before? No. You just artificially deflated your price, and now you need that money and you can't inflate it again without losing customers. Start where you want to be, not at the minimum amount of money that you can kind of stomach selling your work for. At one point, um, I'll use my father as an anecdote, and we'll see if he ends up ever watching this. I'll hear back on it. So my father was worked in advertising. He was an art director for a long time, and he was hired to do a storyboard for a commercial, and he did it, and it didn't take him very long. And told the person how much it was going to cost, and they were like, "Well, that didn't seem to take a whole long time. Like, why should I pay you what you just asked for this?" And my father's response was, it's not that just took an hour, that took 30 years. Me doing it in an hour was because I have all this experience doing it. I have a degree, I have work experience, I have training, I have a skill set that it took me 30 years to develop. So you're not paying somebody for an hour of their time. You're paying me for 30 years of my effort. That's where the price comes from. So all this time that you're putting into perfecting your craft, to getting good at your craft, that is part of your value, and don't sell yourself short. Um, so it's pretty much. Oh yeah, let's mention two more things here at the end. I'm not even sure how to unpack these. Um, at this point, we've been talking essentially about products. Sure, they're art products, but they're products, and you can make enough of them that you can kind of figure out some way that my clay widget makes sense as far as a small business proposition. It's still a product at the end of the day. Whew, gallery work. How do you price gallery work? So let's be honest here. There are no gallery artists who are making their entire living selling through galleries. There's no volume there for it. Even if you're at the top of your game, how many shows are you doing a year? How many shows are you doing every 5 years? One? You're going to sell enough work out of one show that you paid your bills for 5 years? I don't think so. Um, you're earning enough from putting one pot into a prestigious gallery show to pay for you to live and put your kids through college? No, there's no way. Most gallery artists are subsidized in some way. They are teaching. They are doing another body of work. They have a gallery body of work, and they have a more production body of work. Um, their spouse is the one that makes most of the money. They had a different career at one point, saved a whole bunch of money, retired from that career, and now they've got a ceramics career. But man, I don't know of anyone who is 100% paying their bills by doing high-end gallery work in the crafts. I would be doubtful if they claimed to do that. They're pretty much all doing something else. So pricing on gallery work is not really based on time or any of the things that we just talked about, because there's no way it's covering any of that stuff. It's just not going to. I can't, in good conscience, say, hey, I made 10 sculptures this year and I need to make $80,000. So I'm going to need to divide 80,000 by 10, and you all are going to need to pay me at least $8,000 for each one of these things. I mean, maybe, and that'd be $8,000 wholesale. If you're selling through a gallery, your cut is maybe 60%. So that's probably not how you're doing your pricing. It could be, but the reality is that pricing at that level, at a higher level, is based more on reputation and scarcity. I'll give you an example of that. So one of my instructors, I'm not naming people for the most part, just because I don't know if they want me to be naming them. So I'm just going to leave their names out of this. But she, very established ceramic artist, mostly teaches, and very, very picky about what work she fires and then will ever put into a show. And does shows very infrequently, maybe every 10 years. And at one point, I was standing talking to her while she was unloading a kiln, and she'd take a piece out of the kiln and I'd look at it. She'd take a hammer, smash it into a garbage can. She'd take another one out and she'd look at it. She'd put that one on the shelf. And she only kept like 10% of the pieces that she took out of that kiln, hammering the rest of them into shards. And I begged her for one of her tea bowls. And she gave me one of her tea bowls, which I still have and cherish. It wasn't one that she liked, but I'm like, please give me that tea bowl. So she did not keep a lot of work. So she's creating her own scarcity. Not only does she not keep very much, but she doesn't show very often, and she didn't sell her work all that much. So when she finally did have a show, her stuff sold out opening night within like 30 minutes, because everyone who'd ever had her as, a teacher, and everyone who loved her work was like, yes, yes, yes. And that tea bowl is $1,400 at her show. That's a $1,400 tea bowl you gave me. So her value was based on reputation and scarcity. She could charge $10,000, $12,000 for a bowl because you wanted one of her bowls. Here's your chance. There's 30 pieces in this show, and you may not have another show for 10 years. So buy it or don't buy it. And she kind of didn't necessarily need the money either, so she just put the prices on them that she thought they were worth. So that's a good example of what you're going to run into at more the gallery level. The gallery level, it's about becoming a name. It's about being famous within the ceramics community. It's about prestige. It's about things other than simply paying the bills and making a living at it. Production artists, it is about paying the bills and making a living at it, and they could give a rat's ass if anyone knows who they are. Or, I guess it'd be nice, but they're doing the thing they love, and they're making their income at it, and they're supporting their family, and that is what they want from what they're doing. They don't necessarily need the fame. The other example, which is weird, is going to be people who do larger installation, public works type projects, fountains, artwork that is purchased by architects for buildings, for high rises and things. So those people, it's the large scale artwork. It's very nichey. So the way things work for them is that they're mostly really good salespeople, honestly, and really good project managers. So they have to find out about a need. Maybe an architect is asking for bids to do. They have architects will have a certain amount of money that they can use for things like decorating the building. And so they'll say, we have $12 million for artwork for this building. So we'll take, people are submitting their suggestions for how we can best spend that $12 million. And those bids are like bids in construction. It's a full bid. You're saying, for $12 million, I will project manage this project. I will deliver a piece of artwork that will be like this. I handle hiring the subcontractors, figuring out how this is constructed, getting it installed, getting it delivered on time. That, and then paying myself a yearly salary while I am creating this artwork for you. That all comes out of the 12 million. If I get that wrong, if my cost of materials is more than I was expecting, if my subcontractors are more expensive than I thought they were going to be, that comes out of my profit. I don't get to charge you more money. You're going to pay me $12 million. And if I'm not able to make any money, you don't really care. If I go into the red and I lose money on this job, you don't really care. You're paying me $12 million. That's what the bidding is based on. So you need to be very good at understanding where your expenses are, padding in extras, padding in the idea that, hey, there could be a big wildfire in Canada next year and the price of lumber doubles. I need to anticipate things like that. So the people that I know who do that kind of work, they're fantastic at like doing this kind of planning and at selling their vision. So you're going to go in front of this architect or this city planner or this town hall meeting or this board meeting at a university, and you're going to have your model and your slide presentation and your pricing, and you're going to sell them on your vision for how that college, that board should be spending their $12 million on your artwork and not the other 50 people who are applying for the same thing. And then when you win the bid, you have to deliver within that price, within the time that you've said, the quality product that you said that you claimed you could produce, and pay yourself while you do that. It's a very different model of earning than anything else I've really talked about. It's very specialty. My best suggestion for if you're interested in doing that kind of thing is to intern with somebody who does that kind of thing and kind of just see them at work. It is amazing to behold the number of skills that they have to bring to the table to land those contracts. It's very impressive. I've known a couple of people in my life who do it. It's interesting work. So other than those two examples, I would say what I covered and what the calculator covers, is it 100% going to be perfect for everybody? Absolutely not. I'm trying to kind of start this conversation with you and quantify things in a rough way that all the moving parts start to make sense and why there is logic to how this pricing and how this all goes together. It isn't smoke and mirrors. It's not us just randomly pulling prices out of our hats. There's thought behind this process, and you should be aware of what some of that is. You're going to need to adjust what I've said in my advice to the realities of what you yourself are making. Perhaps you aren't a wheel thrower. You do everything sculpturally. Maybe you do extrusions. Maybe you do high-end extrusions, large extrusions. You might need a hydraulic extruder. There's always going to be something that you're going to do that needs to, you need to figure out how it fits into what we've discussed here. Product line is an entirely different. I don't even know if I can adequately. I'll do a video on product line, but it's a tough one because it depends on your specific type of work, what you are making, how you should diversify or spread out your product line in order to be more effective and have less chance of disasters because you put all your eggs in one basket. Or like for wheel throwers, the example of that is that So I'm a wheel thrower, and oh, I broke my wrist. Well, I broke my wrist. I can't throw. I better have some other part of my product line that I can do for the next couple of months, or I'm going to starve. And I could be in real trouble if I've got pre-orders. So I need to be careful of things like that. Anyway, so as always, thanks for joining me. Like I said, this is going to be part of a long series of conversations about the more the business nitty gritty of our profession and what we do. And I hope this is valuable. And if you have specific questions or anything, you can feel free to leave a comment um, or contact me. And I'm happy to answer questions. This is also part of information that we're putting together for the assistants that work at Claymaker Studio, which is one of the places that I work at. So hopefully it will go some ways to answering the many questions I've been having about pricing from those folks. Be sure to subscribe, and you'll get alerted to new content, and hope to see you back here soon. Take care. Bye.